Hi everybody, it's great to be back here again. Itamar, it's Friday, Parashat Vayera. I want to focus on chapter 20. We know that as the people of Israel, the children of Abraham and Sarah, ethics is a very, very important thing, moral and ethics of the Torah. And it doesn't really make sense when we look in this week's portion. Abraham and Sarah, they have a tactic. Every time they go somewhere, they sort of mislead people, saying that Sarah is the sister of Abraham. They're not, they weren't 100% upfront saying they're husband and wife. And of course, these were tactics of survival, but it still sort of leaves a residue of something that sort of doesn't make sense over here, right? It doesn't seem so fitting for someone like Abraham and Sarah to sort of stretch the truth a little bit. And if we look in chapter 20 right away, we see that Avimelech is quite upset, the king of Gerar. Why do you tell me this? What's going on over here? And Abraham is saying, no, she really is my sister, right? In those days, Rashi explains that they were allowed to marry sisters from fathers. They had a common father, but they didn't have a common mother, different mothers. So that was not considered problematic before the Torah. Whatever it is, okay, it was a true fact, but that still doesn't make it right. You misled us. You should have told us that she was your wife. And that is really the claim that Avimelech is claiming to Abraham. You're misleading me. Why do you do this for? So Abraham is still trying to be apologetic. No, she is my sister. But don't worry. Nachmanides asked the question. He goes, how does that satisfy the lion over here? If you're telling him that you're making him think that she's only your sister, then why shouldn't he take her as a wife, right? So what happened? How would this really calm him down? So that's something interesting we have to try to explain. Why did Abraham see a necessity to say that? No, she's my sister. She really is my sister. Just trying to say I'm really not a liar. But obviously something deeper here. And I'd like to give a little insight of my own into that, why Abraham actually used that expression and said, she really is my sister. And I think there's something very, very deep here. Of course there is, but I'd like to give a little insight into that. Before we go there, I want to mention is that a lot of times it's hard to understand the Torah, the Bible. We're living in a world today, 2021. Wow, many, many years have passed since the Torah was given, and especially Torah is talking about things that took place in Abraham's time, 3,800 years ago. Wow, it's really a long time ago. Society has changed in many ways, and it's sometimes very hard to understand what society was like then. We have to try to, in order to understand the verses, we have to go back and understand society at that time. And here is a very, very important thing to stress, is that Abraham and Sarah were amazing people, right? They're the forefathers of Israel. And their moral level and ethical code was so high, much higher than anything you can possibly imagine. And I think in a deep light, these verses, this chapter 20 here, is describing to us today the way man and husband, and wife have to relate with one another. And it's teaching us a very, very important teaching on husband and wife relationships. This is very, very important over here. And we're actually, the Torah is showing this in the eyes through Avimelech, because he has a whole understanding of what it is to relate to how he relates to women and how Abraham relates to them. There are two different light years apart of how they relate to women. And I want to show you this from a couple of different aspects, and hopefully I'll give my insight into the explanation of what I asked in the beginning through this. And quickly, let's go to verse number 16. After Avimelech gives Abraham flock and cattle and servants, he's giving all this money to satisfy him, because he's a prophet and he will pray for him, as God said to him in the dream. He then turns to Sarah and he says to her, I've given all this wealth, 1,000 silver coins, or silver, then it wasn't coins, it was silver pieces to your brother. Okay? What are the silver pieces? We didn't see. He gave him pieces. He gave flock, and he gave sheep, and he gave cattle and he gave maidservants. So we can say, Nachmanides explains that was the value. That was the value of all that what he gave him. Others explain, no, he also gave, besides, he gave all this money. Whatever it was, I give you all this money, lach, to you, ksutenai. This should be like this is a hard thing to explain. It should be like a covering or a garment for your eyes. What is that? What does he mean here? We'll try to explain that in a moment. L'chol asher itach, for everyone with you in your inner circle, that call, and everyone in the outer circle, the whole world, but the way they're looking at this story over here, what took place. V'nochachat, and it will be very, very clear in a way. Nochachat could mean it is now just. In other words, by looking at what I've given you, the suspicions that people had on the outside of thinking that we slept together and he took him as a wife, that will be eliminated here. People won't feel that anymore because I treated you with respect. That's really, in a simple understanding of the verse, what is going on over here. I'd like to quickly go to the Midrash. The Midrash brings, and I'll try to mention 4 different opinions of how to understand what's going on. What Avimelech, by giving all this money, besides the flock and the sheep and all that, and the maidservants, he also gave all this money to Abraham. For what was the purpose of all this? And they're interesting, there are different opinions brought down in the Midrash, and we can see later on in our commentaries in the Middle Ages, each one is going in one of these directions. There are 2 basic directions, really. Let's first see, the first one is Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, who's one of the Tanaim, and he says, basically is that you related to your wife, he's saying to to Abraham, look how you're treating your wife as merchandise. Because when you went to Egypt, you got money from Paro for her. And now, from me, you're getting money. Enough of this. Take this money, and that's it. Let it be let it cover your eyes. You shouldn't look at your wife anymore as property, as merchandise to make money from. A very harsh thing. Now we know something. It's a very, very harsh statement to say that to Abraham. Is that what Abraham looks at his wife as merchandise? But that is one of the commentaries in the Midrash in a deep way. It was going on in the mind of Avimelech, that Abraham was treating his wife as merchandise. Okay, that's explanation number 1. Number 2, Rabbi Yochanan brings down is that, what does it mean, this garment, which we said, ksuteinayim, a garment, literally a garment for your eyes. He's saying a garment of beauty, that he actually gave her all this money, right, in order for her to make these garments, these beautiful garments with colors, to adorn her with beauty, right, with all these wonderful, making her look like a real queen, with all these garments he gave her. So that was called the Ksut Einayim. Reish Lakish comes along and he says, I'm sorry, Mr. Opinion, Rab Brechia says, he made her a matrona, he made her a gvira. In Hebrew, gvira means like a queen. He really literally turned her into a queen. It wasn't like to understand in a what's it called, a physical sense that he gave her these garments, but a more metamorphical sense, like a metaphor, saying that he gave her this all this money in order for her, now she has honor. He gave her honor to treating her like she's a queen. No one's going to bother her anymore. She's like this queen. And Reish Lakish says he wanted to belittle Abraham, and he gave all this money, saying, look, for one night that I was with you, look what I was willing to give, all this money I've given to you all. What did your husband give you until now? These are the different explanations of the Midrash. And I'm not here to analyze. We can spend much longer analyzing each of these explanations. And what we see, in the commentaries of the Middle Ages, they go in one of these directions. Whether it's metamorphical speaking, it's like giving her gave her garments, or was something he gave her the honor by giving her all this money, and now she was honored. No one's going to go near her. But in reality, getting back to what I opened up with, I think here exactly the deep explanation of, if we open on the beginning of Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, his explanation saying that your wife is merchandise in your eyes. Look, you had money from Paro, now you're getting money from me. You have a whole plan here to make money from your wife. When a person accuses someone of something, that in reality, our rabbis teach us something very deep. That is because you yourself are afflicted with that problem. So the fact that Avimelech is claiming to Abraham, you're turning your wife into some kind of merchandise to make money from, it shows that that's the way he related to women. He had that, when he's relating to his queen or his other women of his palace, he's relating to them in that light, that they're merchandise. And that's one, it's very clear from this explanation that he's accusing Abraham of something that he himself, because why does he think that way? Because it's about Abraham, because he himself is guilty of that. That's number one. Or the other opinion of buying, he gave this money to buy beautiful garments and things like that. Again, what was the point of buying all these beautiful garments for Sarah? He wanted, of course, to appease her, realizing now they were prophets, and he made a mistake. You can look at it in a good light. Obviously, it was a good side of this king of Avimelech that he wanted to compensate for the terrible thing he did. Not doing, again, mistakenly did, but he tried to compensate. But how did he try to compensate? His whole way of compensation was through a monetary way, through giving this wealth, to try to say, look at this now. The way I treat, you'll be adorned with beautiful garments. People will now no longer be looking at you anymore as a single woman, but now looking at you are a very fancy lady, you're some queen of somebody, of Abraham, whatever it was. Again, focusing on the external side of life, and the materialistic side of life. And again, that's another approach. And then we see the approach I mentioned before, Reish Lakish, saying that he tried to show, look at this, all this money I've given you. What has Abraham given you your whole life? What does he do for you? Trying to belittle Abraham. He doesn't have the kind of money that he has. What has he really given you? So again, and then there was the approach of Brechia, who mentioned that I'm doing this for your honor, right? He didn't give her physical things, but it was, he did also give physical money, but I'm doing this in your honor, right? I'm making you now an important woman in people's eyes. Again, all these approaches, and there are different directions. Of course, we saw many different directions here, or at least two different directions, either a physical garment that she was purchased or she was given real garments. I'm talking about, what does it mean, ksute naim? Or it could mean, again, as a metaphor, referring to honor and glory he's given her. It's interesting that the Targum Onkelos, the commentary, the famous Targum Onkelos, explains that because of my eyes, that I looked upon you in a lustful way, in a way that, again, he took her home to his house, right? He was thought he can marry her, but he looked at her in a way. He looked at her in that way. So the Onkelos explains that this was ksutei naim. Because of the way his eyes were looking upon her, he gave her this honor by giving her, as a payment, the money and stuff. So again, this sort of counterbalances his way of looking at her in that way. Again, he looked at her in a lustful way, according to Onkelos, but in reality, he wasn't to blame, because he thought he was now his wife. He could look at her in that way, in a way of, actually, the way the commentators explain the Onkelos is that he actually saw her, right, without clothes on. And that he wanted to compensate. It's a very interesting explanation that it was really close to, God forbid, being with Sarah, but it was stopped. And that's why later on, Nachmanides, one of the middle-aged commentaries, say that Sarah was not appeased. She was, the word v'nochacha means she was arguing with him till the end. She was totally debating with him, and she refused to accept his appeasement. Abraham was one who was appeased, and he prayed for him. But Sarah was not at all. She had a lot of claims against Avimelech because he never, because of that, because of the way Onkelos explains it, that he actually looked at her with lust and things like that. Again, so if we look at all the things I brought down in these different commentaries for the Midrash and Onkelos, we see that the approach of Avimelech, although he was different than Paro was a total evil, lustful person. And here, Avimelech was a man of his time again, and the way he looked at women was something that was common at that time. But there was still, God himself says to him that you did this out of sincerity, right? He says, but you weren't clean. Your hands weren't totally clean. And here, I want to wrap things up and get back to the point they're trying to make. Why were his hands totally clean? Because God here was teaching a great lesson of matrimony, a great lesson of husband and wife. How must the husband and wife really relate to one another? And it has to come from a different direction. The direction cannot be based on this, all of the honor, the glory, the physical things. Although those things, of course, are important in life. A person husband and wife, have to have a comfortable home, and her husband has to, obviously, his wife should be treated well with respect and have material things. It's not that the Torah is against those things, because the obligations for a husband is to provide for his wife and support her, of course. But when we're talking about a relationship between husband and wife, the Torah is trying to say, what is the most important thing, how you relate to one another. And here is my insight I'd like to get back to. Abraham says, she's my sister, right? And he stressed that. What? And Mahmani says, how's that going to calm him down? You misled him. No. Abraham was trying to say, wait a second. When it comes to husband and wife relationships, there are two sides. We relate to one another as husband and wife, right? We build a family together. We have that intimacy. But first and foremost, we are brother and sister. What does it mean, brother and sister? Is that we look at each other as equals. As literally, the word sister and brother in Hebrew have the word ach, achava, meaning total unison of equality. Achava means brother. Again, what's the word achava? It means again that brotherlyhood. That we are one. We are equal. We are human beings. Shve erech, the same value each one of us. And Abraham, who was a prophet, and he saw who he was dealing with, he was sort of giving him a little musa. This, of course, I'm giving it as a level of drash, a deep insight into this, is that he was telling Abimelech, listen to me, you're a king, you're a powerful man, you have a lot of money, but your whole way of looking at women is distorted. And we have to look at one another as brother and sister. This is what he was trying to get him to understand. And to try to understand is that first and foremost we are equal. We are equal. You're claiming me that I'm trying to make money from Paro and Euphra, right? But so you look at women as that, as a merchandise. But no, Abraham is saying you must look at each other as we're equal individuals. And that is the important lesson that he was trying to express to Avimelech. That's why he mentioned that to him. And God, as a matter of fact, said you are not clean, right? You're not clean because, yes, you have sincerity, but you will still have that side of you that has to be rectified. And that is what Abraham will pray for you, and to try to bring to you a change in your, again, bring about a change. First of all, pray for you, will help you, obviously, get out of the situation you're in. But in reality, we'll try to heal you from this problem. And if we look later on, there are opinions that literally, that he, in the verse number, 16, when I told about that he was a ksutei nine, that he realized, Onkelos says it right out, we read it, is that he realized that his putting his lustful eyes on Sarah in that way was a mistake. Right here he made a mistake because she was married. But here was like in a way of him, an awakening. And the fact that he gave this money and he tried to rectify the situation was that Abraham did succeed in a certain way to realize that a woman should be treated as an equal, and then not merchandise like the way you really look at women, but treat a woman as equal. This important lesson, I think, we can end with summing this up. I think the lesson is very clear: is that the Torah here is teaching us the beauty of a relationship with husband and wife. This is what Abraham in Gerar, when he went down there to the Negev, and he meets this king. This is what the message that he's trying to teach us all. Shabbat shalom, besarot tovot, yishrot v'nechamot.